Hello students, today we're going to be talking about solving one-step equations. We're going to move into a whole unit of solving equations, but we're going to start with one step, and we're going to start with addition and subtraction. But before we get too far into this, we're on page 50 in our composition book, and there's a chart I want you to write down. And the chart is going to start out like this, and it's going to say the opposite of, and on the other side is. So let's talk about the opposite. The opposite of add is subtract. And so the opposite of subtract is add. And the opposite of multiply is divide. So you guessed it, the opposite of divide is multiply. And it's important that we know this and we know this quickly, because when solving equations, we have to do the opposite operation of what's already being done. So you need to know that these are all the opposites of each other so that we can quickly get into solving those equations. Another thing that you need to know before we get started into actually solving is the goal in solving equations. The goal is to isolate the variable. In other words, we need to get the variable by itself on one side of the equal sign and nothing else with it. It's got to be by itself. And there are steps that we go through to get the variable by itself, and most of those steps are opposite operations. So let's look at an example. We'll say y plus 3 equals 7. And we need to figure out what y is. And you're probably looking at me thinking, duh, Mr. Cohen, y is 4. Yes, y is 4 because 4 plus 3 equals 7. But what is the process to get to that? Well, the process is I have to do the opposite operation. If right now I'm adding 3, then the opposite of that would be subtracting 3. And there's a rule in math that you've learned before, I'm pretty sure, is what you do to one side of the equal sign, you have to do to the other side, because everything needs to be balanced. So you have to do everything on both sides. So I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides, because that's the opposite, and that's going to get rid of everything on this side except the y. And we know that positive 3 minus 3 is 0, so all I'm left with is y, and 7 minus 3 is 4. So I know that y equals 4, and if I plug that back in, 4 plus 3 does equal 7. So again, I chose the opposite operation, and I did it to both sides. I subtracted 3 on both sides. So let's look at another example. What if I have r minus 8 equals negative 2? Okay, so what I'm trying to find is, what is r? What number is r so that when I subtract 8, I get negative 2? Well, let's do the opposite operation. So I'm looking with the r. What's with the r? It's minus 8, and the opposite of that is plus 8. So I'm going to add 8 to both sides. And when I add 8 to both sides, negative 8 plus 8 is 0, so all that's left is r equals, what is negative 2 plus 8? And I know that that answer is positive 6. So I know that r equals 6. So let's plug it in. Is 6 minus 8 negative 2? Absolutely. So that means that my answer is correct. R equals 6. Well, let's say I have another example of somebody trying to confuse me, and they put something like negative 3 equals t minus 5. Okay. Let's not let that throw you, that t is on the right-hand side instead of the left. Let's just do what we know to do, and that is opposite operation. I've got to get t by itself. Well, what's happening to the t? Something is being subtracted, so the opposite of that is addition, so I'm going to add that same thing to both sides. So instead of minus 5, I'm going to do plus 5 to both sides of the equal sign. Now we know that negative 5 plus 5 is 0, that cancels out, and all I'm left with is t. Well, what is negative 3 plus 5? Well, we know that that is positive 2. So t equals 2. Now, if you don't like this, that's okay. You can rewrite it as t equals 2. but it's okay to leave it as 2 equals t or t equals 2. And let's check it. If I plug the 2 in for t, is 2 minus 5 negative 3? Well, yes. So then that means t does equal 2, and that answer is correct. So here are 2 sample problems that I would like for you to solve. The first one is n plus 3 equals negative 1, and the second one is s minus 4 equals negative 7. So show your steps, show what you did to both sides of the equation, and then take a picture of it and turn it in using the turn in button through Edmodo.